request Dr. Reetu Jaiswal to present his views.
Respected Chair and my dear friends, today I am going to speak on the concept of power with a special reference to Tagore and Foucault. In this paper, I have made an attempt to present the notion of power in the views of the two great philosophers of the 20th century, Tagore and obviously Foucault. The concept of power has been very mostly commonly used phenomena in the history of humanities. While in the Western liberal societies, the discourse of power is generally associated with coercion and domination, in the latter half of the 20th century, theories of power tend to invoke the distinction between two broadly used expressions of power as power over and power to. Whereas the power over is understood in terms of power as domination, the power to is taken as power as capacity. The power over or power as domination model of power largely has a negative connotation. Michel Foucault, one of the most influential thinkers in shaping understanding of power, defines power in both senses, repressive as well as progressive. Foucault understands power as a relational force that permeates the entire social body, connecting all social groups in a web of mutual influence. According to him, power is everywhere diffused and embodied in discourse, knowledge, and regimes of truth. As a relational force, power constructs social organization and hierarchy by producing discourses and truths, by imposing discipline and order, and by shaping human desires and subjectivities. In this context, Foucault sees power as simultaneously productive and repressive. A social body cannot function without it, despite its perennially oppressive manifestations. Power creates knowledge and forms subjects who are restricted as well as enabled by its omnipresent force. He mentioned about the mechanisms of surveillance in prisons, discipline in schools and systems for the administration and control of population, and promotion of norms for shaping human desires and subjectivities. Although power as enablement gives the impression of power to model, but covertly it is based on power over model. The way disciplinary power controls and affects the norms of the society and behavior of people, they become so influential and embedded that they are beyond our perception, causing us to discipline ourselves without any coercion. The concept of power as domination has also been a matter of significant discussion in Indian context. Rabindranath Tagore, a great poet, philosopher, and educationist, was a true humanist. He respected human values more than anything and believed that dehumanization and mechanization is the source of evil in the society. Tagore believed and he described power over model in the context of colonialism and imperialism as inherently immoral and irrational. He criticizes the Western concept of nation and nationalism as it is based on power over or power as domination model. He asserts, I quote, "Power in all its forms is irrational. It is like the horse that drags the carriage blindfolded." Against the notion of a state as an institutionalized embodiment of power, he argues that imperialism is driven by the struggle for power and a desire for domination over other people's territory, culture, and ways of life. He further argues that power cannot find their equilibrium in themselves. He argued power has to be made secure not only against power but also against weakness, for there lies the peril of its losing balance. Now I would like to discuss how these two thinkers have tried to question the then existing power structures by presenting the power to or power as capacity model. Foucault does not argue that we cannot get out of the power structure of the society and institutions. This model could be found in his views when he claims that we are freer than we think we are, and we need to understand and resist against this domination and power. We have freedom, and because of this whole disciplinary power structure, we don't realize it. In dealing with ethics, Foucault presents the notion of the self, which will not accept these disciplinary arrangements and will follow those things which it finds to be the right. He is against any rule-oriented ethical norm or any other universally applicable moral principle. He argues that the self should constantly challenge those power structures and attempt to create space for themselves. However, this does not mean that we could exercise an absolute freedom. We are not as atomistic selves, and we live in a society which has interdependent relationships and structures. Still, we can contest these relationships and structures and constitute ourselves as active moral agents. It is by the process of self-formation and self-constraint that one makes oneself an ethical being and exercise freedom. It is essentially a non-humanist project because Foucault rejects the idea of an authentic, absolute self, but rather champions an ethics of creativity as opposed to the ethics of authenticity. Our educational institutions also have disciplinary power structure, which makes us believe that whatever is being taught to us is the right thing. Foucault argues that the teachers should teach the students how these power structures are working in their lives and how it is working for their domination. Things should not be accepted as uncontested and the only truth. The outer self has been very important and very significant in Foucault's views, whereas the notion of inner self has been very significant in Tagore's views. So, the Part 2 model could be understood by Tagore's views on humanism. In Tagore's humanism, interpersonal relationship plays a pivotal role. It is the understanding of human relationship in this form that is at the heart of all his writings. Human values such as love and service of mankind are the sole means to attain the all-pervasive one. In this interpersonal relationship, man considers the other as one with the self. The realization of oneness works at two levels. At one level, it is the negation of one's self-centered inclination, and on the other hand, it is the comprehension of love for others. An individual can achieve freedom not from alienation or the realization of abstract individuality, but true freedom lies in the transcendence of mere being through creative becoming. The outer self of man can be limited by material needs, according to Tagore, but the inner self is not limited or constrained by any material need or any particular caste, community, or nation. It is the realization of this inner sense of the self by means of liberating one's personal desires, by understanding one's social and moral obligations towards others, and by sharing their feelings and burdens of life, which defines the true nature of man. Tagore argues that when materials are seen or used in isolation from this harmonious mutuality, they become destructive. He perceived nationalism as a purely Western construct and warned against its disastrous effects. Productivity of power lies in development of the feeling of love and mutuality, according to Tagore. In this paper, by presenting the views of these two philosophers, I want to argue that whether it is Foucault who is talking about developing a sort of Power 2 model in which you have to develop a capacity to criticize yourself and to criticize your own society and social values, it is at the same time very important to follow Tagore's model of Power 2, in which he is talking about developing a sense of love and mutuality and togetherness with the other members of your society. If oneself becomes so critical about one's own foundations that he starts criticizing or critically thinking about each and everything, that foundation would be missing. And I think that Tagore's Power 2 model, which is based on his humanistic view, could provide us that foundation through which we can assimilate both the notions, both the models of power which have been provided by Foucault and Tagore, in which we can at the same time think about our own mistakes and we can become critical about our own notions while at the same time respecting the views of others. So I would like to just say a few words and I will finish this paper, that we cannot transcend this contingent truth that we are always determined by one or the other power structure of the society. The finest of the humanistic values do imply some fixed and uncontested notions which might constrain the development of the self. However, We cannot deny the importance of these values which create a system and also a feeling of togetherness in the society. We cannot keep questioning everything every moment because in order to do that, we need some kind of foundation, and once we believe in that foundation, we accept something to be absolutely given. In this case, the knowledge of the self as a free agent and a spiritual being should be reconciled in a way that while having the sense of togetherness and a love towards others, we should also be open to contest our notions and keep checking whether it is in accordance with the freedom of other selves or not. The power to model develops a capacity in us which should challenge the power over tendency. If this could be the case, we will be able to realize our true selves and also give further scope for others to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much for finishing the paper in time.
Okay. My question is to Professor Selva. Actually, initially in your paper, you mentioned that reason of tension and conflict as various differences, and we should try to resolve differences. I personally think conflicts and tensions are not because of differences. Rather, we are not promoting differences. In fact, we must promote differences to the extent, like until and unless it is not destructive to society, not destructive to humanity and to country as well. To that extent, we must promote differences. This is and we are not allowing differences. That is why tensions are more. Secondly, sir, the way you presented Shaivism, a wonderful presentation, wonderful account of Shaivism is there. But how would you differentiate this Shaivism, like this description, from religion and philosophy? Because the description, I personally think it was more religious than philosophical. How would you differentiate? And just a little comment on Dr. Reetu's presentation. Yes, Rabindranath Tagore criticized nation and nationalism, and that must be criticized. Not because any other reason, but because of wrong translation. The concept of nation and concept of Rashtra are not same. Actually, our academicians translated the Indian Rashtravad as Western translation, Western nationalism. Actually, it is not the case. Nation is based on power, true, but Rashtra is not the vision based on power. Here, the concept of Rashtra is based on, say, from Maha Upanishad, we can quote, Ayam Nijahaparo Veti Gadana Laguchetisam Udari Charitanam Tu Vasudev Kutumbakam. This is the concept of Rashtra, means despite having many differences, we must understand the whole earth as our family. That is the concept of Rashtra. So we must take this point seriously, that these wrong translations have done a very, you can say, we must solve this problem, we must translate properly. Thank you very much.
My first question is to previous speaker who was speaking on Dada Bhagwan's holistic science. The question is, how can you say Dada Bhagwan whole system of belief or whatever it is holistic? Because you are avoiding social conflicts. You say that world cannot be changed. It means you cannot fight against the domination of colonialism, you cannot fight for your freedom, you cannot change the world, you cannot fight terrorism, you can only change yourself. So once you neglect the social sphere of life, how can you call it holistic? This is the question to you. Second question is to Reetu. You said that Rabindranath Tagore's conception of power is power too, but we all know he was very much against colonialism and nationalism. And colonialism and nationalism means power over. But he was in favor of cosmopolitanism. And cosmopolitanism is also some sort of a power structure. So how can you say that his concept does not look into the power over? If a society is to maintain some sort of order, some sort of power over is to be accepted. This is the question.
Yeah, thank you for your question. About the idea of differences, why is it viewed in a negative sense? But as you know, conventionally most of the problems arise due to differences. So I was just highlighting that, but I agree with you, the differences can be enriching and can be cross-sharing as well. About the idea of why am I religious and not philosophical, there are underpinning philosophies behind Saivism. Of course, it's not critically evaluated, but the underlying ontology as well as the metaphysics are embedded in it. But I agree with you, it's not pure philosophy, but it is taking a way of life to enable this harmonious living. So that was my direction. Thank you.
Very nice question. I would say that you might have read almost all the teachings and others, what Dada Bhagwan said in a simple Gujarati, and then the other books are in translations. I have gone through the dialogue with Dadaji and Aptavani, that is the publication. I am a student of Sanskrit literature from the very beginning. Whatever he said, that is already said in our Vedic Vangmaya or in everywhere. But he lived the philosophy, or you can say he lived the theory. So, when one get realization, we all have to get realization. As Lokmanya Tilak said that Janma Siddha, Swatantrata mera Janma Siddha Adhikar hai, freedom is my birthright. I am going to that point, sir. 1 minute. So, to get liberation is everyone's birthright, sir. That is, I am telling about our Upanishad and Vedic Vangmaya according to that. So now, we are the part of the society. But at one moment, if one renounces the world, goes to forest, gets the enlightenment, then he comes back to society, and then he shows the way how to live with peaceful coexistence, or how to adjust, or how we should be a good family member like father, brother, sister, all kind of things. And then society, then nation, then world. So to fight with the negative forces like terrorism, you said, like Buddha said, violence, ahimsa paramo dharma, like that. So they are the people, you must be knowing this, you know it I think, but still I am just explaining as a student of our Oriental studies, that negative and positive forces are there, vice and virtues are there, pap and punya are there in our society. What we personally realize is, or what we realize is with samashti, or you say universally. But when one gets that awareness, and they are the people, they want that everyone should get that realization that we should do something for family, for society, for nation, for world. So when they preaches something, it is not escapism. It is not one is escaping from the society or liabilities, worldly liabilities. And one more thing, sir. We have as a principle or as a theory, three satta, that is Paramarthik satta, Vyavaharika satta, Pratibhasik satta. That is in Vedanta, you must be knowing that. So the Vyavahar, the world is very much, we see it, we have to do all the things. I was here and Mr. Dhananjay Bhanj, sitting behind you, he is the editor of Vishwasya Vrittanta, Daily Sanskrit newspaper of Surat. He was calling me. So I had to go to him and tell to him to please come here. But Paramarthika Drishtya, spiritually, I know that whether I am getting disturbed or I am fulfilling my liability or I should fulfill my duties like that. So adopting the philosophy of holistic approach is not escaping or avoiding the social responsibility, as I know, I understand. And that is my reply. Thank you very much.
First of all, I would like to respond to Dr. Aditya. it is, whatever you said, it is based on the misunderstanding of Tagore's concept on nationalism. He was against the Western concept of nationalism because he was criticizing the act of imperialism, and he was completely against the imitation of that sort of nationalism which was derived by Western notions. He said that India has its own diversity, its own culture and tradition. Whatever notion of nationalism we are going to apply in India should be primarily based on the situation of Indian context. So imitation in any case cannot be acceptable by Tagore, and he was not an anti-nationalist as has been generally understood by people. I guess that is a misunderstanding of his views. Okay. Okay, so you know, he's against the Western concept of nationalism because it somehow practiced imperialism, which was going against the interest of other countries like India. And it should be whatever concept of nationalism we apply, it should be coming out of our own tradition. That was his view. And in response to Dr. Alok Tandon's comments or questions, I would say that the power over concept I have used here as a power as domination. Okay. So whenever you use your power to dominate others, that could never be acceptable to Tagore. He will always say that you use your power in such a way that you can create something. You could do something good for the society and others. If you are using your power in a negative sense in which you are trying to repress others, that could never be acceptable, whether it is coming in the form of nationalism, cosmopolitanism, or humanism, or anything. So even if you are deriving cosmopolitanism or humanism, it should always be based on the power two notion, which is to love others and to respect others. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Reetu Jaiswal. Now I request Madam Nesi to give comment, and she can read paper, tell the summary within 5 minutes.
Thank you. Now, good evening to all of you. We have heard the presentations of our three scholars, Dr. Shivabalan Selvaradurai, Dr. Baldevan Sagar, and Dr. Reetu Jaiswal. And Professor Shivabalan has concentrated on Shaivism. We can say the South Indian philosophy of the Bhakti tradition. And taking on Shaivism, he has explained the holistic vision and the harmonious living, how the philosophy of Shaivism, all its details and the philosophical, ethical aspects, presents the view of a holistic living, holistic perspective, and enables for a harmonious living. He has presented it in a very beautiful manner, and I must express my thanks to Dr. Shivabalan. Now, Dr. Balwender Sagar has concentrated on the philosophy of Dada Bhagavan. And what he has concluded or explained is, there is the chances of harmonious living, the principles of holistic thinking and harmonious living are present or even taught in the philosophy of Dada Bhagavan, and we can find the principles of global unity. And because it is a very short paper, has explained it very beautifully that the holistic living can be the principles of holistic living can be found from the teachings of Dada Bhagavan. Now, the young philosopher Dr. Reetu Jaiswal has taken up a very relevant topic, the concept of power, and I think her presentation, the final stage of her presentation is different because she has taken up Foucault and Rabindranath Tagore. But at the initial, her views on power to and power over. The actual difference is from domination and subordination. So there is the principle of domination, the power over, and there is the principle of subordination or subordinating, and in between we can find the principle of power to, namely the power of enabling, power of understanding the potentiality or energizing or making them more powerful. I think this is very relevant to our topic of holistic living. We are not on the two extremes, we are taking on the moderate or medium median, and hence this principle, the topic chosen by Dr. Reetu is also very relevant to our general theme of the conference. So I must thank Dr. Balwan Sagar and Dr. Reetu for that matter. Now with these ideas in view, I thought I have a paper on that I have already prepared, very short paper. I thought I won't have any time, but now time is there. So I request your patient hearing for that, because it is a philosophy paper. The title of the paper is Relevance of Deliberation in Ethics. And after hearing all the presentations yesterday and today on holistic living and harmonious, holistic principles and harmonious living, I think this topic is very relevant to our discussion and very relevant to our conference. So even though it takes some 10-15 minutes, I think I will read the paper, then only the full idea will come. The core of the paper is that the way in which we philosophize. I take the example of ethics. The way in which we do ethics or we do ethical interactions, it can be done in different ways, either in way of indoctrination or in the way of liberalism, or in some other way that we come across in my paper. But there is a method called deliberation, and this method is as old as the Greek tradition in philosophy, and this method carries very different, very meaningful significance for our context of global society, harmonious living, holistic perspective, and that is why I would like to present this paper. I request your patient listening. Relevance of deliberation in ethics. In his book Problems of Philosophy, Bertrand Russell attempts to the question of the usefulness of studying philosophy. He raises the question, why study philosophy? He admits the fact that philosophy has been quite unsuccessful in providing definite answers to questions. There was a time when philosophers dreamed of getting rid of philosophy by solving all philosophical problems. We were able to revise and reformulate philosophical questions to the point that we can give a systematic answer to the problem, in which case it ceased to be a philosophical problem and it is named as a scientific problem. Since the time of ancient Greeks to the present, a systematic and scientific way of getting rid of philosophy by solving all philosophical problems has been attempted with little success. The developments in the field of molecular and biological mechanisms of life, for example, have provided a richer understanding of the concept of life and heredity, so that the once philosophical problem of how the inert matter could become alive become a matter of an established scientific fact. Within the field of philosophy, the efforts of Wittgenstein, Austin, and other linguistic philosophers to have discovered systematic methods of solving philosophical questions seem to some that we might be able to solve all questions within a few lifetimes. But so far, only a very small number of philosophical problems have been amenable to scientific, mathematical and linguistic solutions. However, a very large number of other questions left to us by the preceding centuries, going back to the ancient Greeks, are still with us. More interesting to find is that new philosophical problems are constantly being thrown up and whole new areas of philosophy invented. The Greeks were confronted with the questions like what is the nature of justice, what is the proper aim and goal of life, what is the nature of language and its meaning, etc. So this is the Greek, the problems that bothered the Greek mind. At the same time, subjects like the philosophical implications of quantum mechanics or Gödel theorem or philosophy of language or philosophy of mind, as we think of them today, possibly could not have an impact on the Greek minds. Even at the 21st century, even at the end of the 21st century, we shall still have a very large number of philosophical problems left. The reason is that philosophical questions are different in method, style and presuppositions. They are marked by the absence of satisfactory and systematic ways to answer. They tend to be mostly framework questions and are typically about conceptual issues. So this is the nature of the philosophical questions. Perhaps this is the reason why Russell puts the primary aim of philosophy as acquisition of knowledge and not providing definite answers to questions. What is important in philosophy is to raise a question, continue consideration of such questions, make us aware of its importance, examine all approaches to them, and keep alive the speculative interest in philosophy. According to Russell, philosophy raises questions not for the sake of definite answers, but for the sake of seeking clarity and understanding the various dimensions of the issue. It suggests that many possibilities, the same issue which enlarges our conception of what is possible, enriches our imagination and diminishes our dogmatic assurances. None of these expected from definitely ascertainable knowledge. Furthermore, this questioning attitude makes us more tolerant. We become more receptive to other people's beliefs and thoughts. Sometimes it enables us to look for in which the impartial use of reason results in an appreciation of the other viewpoints and other people's rights and needs. So this is the nature of philosophy, because by its very nature, it's a question of raising questions and not answering questions. Now, I take up the field of philosophy called ethics, because ethics is it's a field where it is concerned with the pursuit of good life, and in this pursuit, it will discuss or it treats questions in different ways, and these different ways are very important for us. Historically, we can say ethics is taught in an indoctrinating way, like followed by the religious, political and philosophical groups. Now the 17th and 18th centuries, there followed the liberal thinkers, the tolerance model or the neutrality model. And this takes us to the field of science, where we say that science is value neutral, and this point has been questioned by the ethical thinkers. And it is here that we come to the point of deliberation. So what is deliberation? Deliberation is a kind of reasoning concerned not with the discovery of first principles or truths which are fixed and invariable, but reasoning about the means to ends. When one deliberates, one thinks about what is in one's own power to do and what action can best bring out the right end. Deliberation is a way of analyzing the rational consistency of our values and beliefs. It aims at a debate between all the people concerned in order to increase the wisdom or prudence of our decisions, and not to reach a consensus of choosing one value and banning the others. The classic example of this model is Aristotle. He considered deliberation as the typical method of practical reasoning. In fact, in his great work Nicomachean Ethics, a distinction between contemplative and calculative reason has been drawn by Aristotle. He says, thinking about the nature of justice is contemplative reason, whereas making decisions as to how to implement justice in a particular instance is a function of calculative reason. Aristotle recommended that both are important and needed if we are to live our lives fully. We need both to be able to identify what is true and good absolutely using contemplative reasoning, and to be able to order our actions and desires so that we are led towards the good life using calculative or practical reasoning. This procedure, adopted as the real method of ethics right from the beginning, disappeared shortly after and substituted by the other two methods of indoctrination and liberalism. It is time to change the situation. We need a deliberative society in the present state of history. Now, deliberation is a very difficult task. It needs some preconditions. First, the capacity of assuming that in value questions, nobody has all the truth and that others may have at least as much truth as we have. Second, the thought that others can help us find the way towards truth. And the third one is, we must have the capacity of listening to others. Deliberative skills are not natural but cultural, and therefore they must be developed and trained in our society so that we can develop a deliberative society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Nesi. Now we have to felicitate the speakers. Dr. Baldevanand sir. And Dr. Reetu Jaiswal. Thank you very much. And this session is over. And the next session will start 6:30. Yes, here itself it will. Yes. Guests and delegates, please visit the bookstall of Motilal Banaras Das after this session. It is RN near the philosophical books near the registration desk. After the session is over, you please see that stall.